seeing him in London. So I'm going to him. I think we got to design this. That's a greeting in the action.
Well, if you can stand there, then you can start.
Okay. Yeah, I thought the same thing. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Please, no. Otherwise, there is very big clouds. Well, not that much short. Yeah. But it's past 5. Later on in the middle of the winter, it's really bright It's really dark here. Yeah. In the northern part of Massachusetts for a couple of months.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Enterprise Architecture and Business Transformation stream. We've got 4 speakers that are going to be speaking. The first gentleman I'll introduce in a moment. There are going to be presentations also integrating some of the Open Group standards. We'll talk about information architecture in terms of the business transformation and digital enterprise. We'll talk about enterprise modeling. And then we'll have strategy to execution, which is one of the banes of enterprise architecture. It's easy making architecture, it's hard making things actually happen. Our first speaker today is Mr. Sukumar Daniel. He's a principal consultant over in Action Research Foundation. He's been a stalwart of the IT for IT Forum. He's also been one of the authors of Plex Mode. He is CEO of his own architecture design studio and consulting, but I think I want to put the word on design and business design, enterprise architecture, because I think it's one aspect that is lacking in many cases in enterprise architecture. It's all a systems engineering type of approach. He's won several rewards through his company, and right now he's looking at the IT. He's basically one of the authors of the IT for IT standard. So without further ado, Sukumar, please. Thank you.
Hear me? Hello. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My sincere thanks to the Open Group for this opportunity. It gives me immense pleasure to present this paper and to share my thoughts. May you live in interesting times is an ancient Chinese curse, and the Chinese are surely ensuring interesting times for all of us. Even as we are present in this room, change is 1,000 times more powerful than the Industrial Revolution are happening. While enterprises are fighting for survival, the people are wondering where and how will they fit into this new digital ways of working. It is an opportunity for growth, or is it redundancy and irrelevance? The master key for overcoming this disruption lies in the enterprise's capability to transform its people and in the people's capability to transform themselves. In other words, to transform your enterprise, transform your people. Today I present a case about how an apparel manufacturing enterprise is preparing itself to thrive in the disrupted future. Uncertain, changing, challenging. are the three top words executives use to describe the fashion industry. Fashion industry has been around forever. Evidence suggests that human beings may have been wearing clothes as far back as 100,000 to 500,000 years. In 2016, the industry was valued at $3 trillion or $3,000 billion. This would be as big as the GDP of the 7th largest country in the world. 67% of the respondents believe that things have taken a turn for the worst. The top two challenges clearly are driven by disruption, first caused by changes in society, and the second stemming from disruptive technologies. Some are grabbing the opportunity by the scruff of the neck and adopting new ways of working to achieve success in the marketplace. Amancio Ortega is a great example of someone who overcame the challenges in the apparel industry. He pioneered the use of agile supply chains and was replenishing his stores once in 3 weeks compared to the once in 20 of his competition. There seem to be two ways of viewing the world and effecting changes: a rear view mirror driving or front windshield driving. One looks at the past and tries to improve the ways of working. The other looks out of the front windshield and grabs the opportunities that arise from disruption. Walmart took 100 years to become the king of brick and mortar retail. Amazon took 25 years to reach the same place, but without the brick and mortar. They challenged the premises and opened up the Pandora's box of retailing without a store. By 2021, we are seeing that Amazon is going to be almost double in terms of sales of apparel compared to the nearest competitor. The target of transformation today is to create an enterprise and IT operating model which embraces and thrives on change. Recent analysis of organizational change suggests a growing concern with the tempo of change, understood as the characteristic rate, rhythm, or pattern of work and activity. Episodic change is contrasted with continuous change. Episodic change follows the sequence unfreeze, transition, and refreeze, whereas continuous change follows the sequence freeze, rebalance, unfreeze. Continuous change is a bit of Zen. In the IT world, maybe we call this two-speed IT. In our example, once Amazon mastered its portal platform, it then gained the ability to go anywhere in retail. In the following sections, I'll present a case study completed earlier this year of a leading apparel manufacturer and the preparations for the future. They supply apparels to a wide range of big brands, all known for quality products. They want to grab the opportunities that disruption brings their way. They have set themselves an audacious business goal of doubling the turnover in the next 5 years. To do this, they were seeking a blueprint for their future business operating model. They sought answers for what should be the requirements of a new IT operating model that would allow them to benefit from changed ways of working driven by automation. They find that conventional forecast-driven supply chain-based operating model inadequate to meet the challenges of a volatile and turbulent demand typifying markets today. However, they also find that there are huge opportunities and set themselves an audacious business goal. Their existing solutions are fractured. Some information is captured again and again manually in different applications which are not integrated. They have big lead time in processing customer orders, releasing purchase orders for their requirements. Their people say that they spend more time managing the system than managing their work. Late or faulty shipments can eat away the profit and can even lead to an LOB becoming red or losing customers. 70% of change initiatives are set to fail in meeting their objectives. There is a need for a new paradigm. EA-driven business transformation is an approach that delivers results by synergizing enterprise architecture with a focus on people and behavior elements. It has the potential to improve chances of transformational success while operating organizational change and development initiatives. I would like to pose a question here. What do you think are the 3 top obstacles to organizational change? Anybody? You got it right. The first is people, second is people, and the third is people. But the aspect about people is that change drives the fear of the unknown. It is also the oldest and the strongest emotion known to mankind. The fear of change, or changing things, is called metathesiophobia. It comes from the Greek word meta, meaning change, or phobos, meaning fear. It is often linked with tropophobia, which is a fear of moving, or we can even call it the fear of transformation. Transformation is about moving everyone from dread to doing. This is the transformation architect's primary job. When confronted with change, people start with D for dread. From there, they move to resistance. And from resistance, they can move to exploration. From exploration, they can move to acceptance. And finally, to doing it. The key aspect is also that it doesn't matter where the person is, they can always go back. Suddenly something new comes and they're driven by fear. By the time fear subsides, it will be too late. By the time you're not afraid of what you're planning to start, say, or do, someone else would have already done it. Or it will already be said and done, or it will be irrelevant. If you're invited to lead a transformation initiative, it's always good to start right. You need to ensure that the customer agrees to the rigor of the method. In practice, this means that the proposal establishes TOGAF and the ADM as the principal method to guide intervention. It is also important that concepts such as value chains, operating models are introduced prior to commencing the project. These need to be spoken about in the initial visits and reinforced through contractual clauses. The EA-driven toolkit has been assembled to facilitate what can be termed as learning from the future. This is a primary mindset driving the transformation process in the journey which builds a solution. Iteration in a spiral enables the transformation architects to take the organization with them in the journey towards a solution. Let's have a look at some of these tools and how they synergize in practice. Transformation does not happen by itself. It needs to be managed as an organization and change initiative. Guidance and direction need to be provided. It needs a leadership that learns from the evolving future. In the outermost, we see the preliminary phase. There are 3 tools that we use in the preliminary phase. One is action research, the other is Otter's 8 steps of organizational change, and the TOGAF ADM itself. In the second stage is where we do the visioning or the design. In this, we are using multiple things, IT for IT and the service-oriented operating model, value chains, agile supply chains, capability-based planning, and finally, when we are rendering the architecture or bringing about the artifacts that are going to be used, we iterate across the ADM using these tools, TOGAF, IT for IT, and Architect. Transformation happens in stages, and as you go through these cycles, you find that understanding deepens. Action research is a reflective program. It's a reflective, progressive problem solving, alternating between action and critical reflection. It is also led by individuals working with others in teams or as a part of a community of practice. Action research and the ADM are highly compatible. That activity at each phase deepens the understanding and spirals to a valuable result. So you have the preliminary phase where you start with the architecture principles and the request for architecture. The vision phase creates a next level of abstraction. And then the business architecture, the IS architectures, and the opportunities and solutions. Now, in the kind of work that we were doing in this project, we were trying to create enough knowledge and capability within the enterprise to be able to generate a request for proposal and to construct a completely new IT operating model. We got this 8-step process for managing large changes. Anybody interested in transformation should read this. Because we talk a lot about technology, we talk a lot about modeling, but we don't talk about people. And what I found was that there is a lot of synergy between the two. Creating a sense of urgency, that is one of the key things. And that is done in your preliminary phase. Then you can see that each of the cycles have got a specific area or guidance within the TOGAF area. The idea is that you want to be able to look at how your people are moving, not just how the architecture is moving. Because if you don't take the people with you, the architecture stays on paper. Now, do you recall the flat earth theory, right? Sometimes I get into a lot of confusion because people say, what is a service? Right? It's almost like that. There seems to be, is IT a service? Is this a service? That a service? If you ask any IT person, he says, I write applications, I manage this, I manage that. But actually, the concept of everything being a service is really key to success. And also, there's been a lot of debate about it, but we're very happy to say that there's some good white paper in the IT for IT forum, which really defines how business services and IT services combine. And we talked a lot, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about the IT value chain and its backbone. Now, it really talks about when we look at the conceptual model, right? It is supposed to be understood by business users, right? By executives, by normal people, not just the technicians. And then that moves to a logical model. And from there comes your realized model. And what we are doing in this is actually to build the conceptual model, to say, why do we need it? What do we need? How are we going to do it? So when you look at that aspect, you're really taking the entire enterprise and saying, how do things work? A journey well begun is half done. So when we look at how we start, right, the outermost circle of what we're talking about, this is one of the key things. If you want success in transformation, you need to do a few things. The first one is the sense of urgency. All of us know that when we try to move the organization, there is inertia. Inertia is a tendency to do nothing or to remain unchanged. Kotter says a sense of urgency overcomes this inertia. So can you really develop a sense of urgency? How do you develop a sense of urgency? And believe me, if you can find the right process of the sense of urgency, you've got something really good in your hands. Because sometimes it can even shut down arguments. And in this case, we really had some ready-made generators setting outrageous 5-year goals, right? Because what happens is people get comfortable saying, oh, we are doing well. Yeah, okay, but next 5 years we want to double the turnover. Then this one is even better. It's the role of a crisis, right? Because when the crisis is there, people are going to do something about it. In this particular case, we developed a very interesting point that the ERP, for whatever level it was working on, is going to be going out of service. So what are you going to do? You can't use it anymore. You can't improve it anymore. Your vendor is drawing away. So when people tell me, why do you want to change? I told them, look, do you remember using Microsoft Windows 10 years ago? And now you're using Microsoft 10. I hate it. Doesn't matter. But can you use it anymore? Does your company give it? No. It's the same way. This application is going to go out of service. Maybe there's some things that we can do to make it better this time. And the previous rollout experience was really terrible. It caused a lot of damage. There were people who were fired, the company was shut down some of the units, so therefore nobody wanted a repetition of this. And everywhere I went, I kept hearing, simple, simple, simple. In fact, we named the project itself Project Sensor. which is Spanish I hear for being simple. The other aspect, the next step is really what we call as confirming governance and support. Right? What Cotter says is that when a major change is always difficult to accomplish, a powerful force is required to sustain the progress. Weak committees are even worse. A strong guiding coalition is always needed, one with the right composition, level of trust, and shared objective. Now, we just say AGB. Now, who's going to be in the AGB? What does the AGB do? Basically, the AGB is going to control, implementing a system of controls over the creation and monitoring of all architecture components and activities. And why do they do it? To ensure effective introduction, implementation, and evolution of the architectures within the organization. So what is it about the AGB? What's it about the governing board? Now, Cotter puts it that leaders provide direction, motivation, and energy required for change, while managers make it happen. So when you're looking at how you set up your AGB, you want a good blend of the two. If everybody is a leader, nothing's going to happen. If everybody is a manager, same story. So you need to get this thing right. What is the position and power of the people? What is the expertise that they bring to the table? What is the credibility that they bring to the table? Because when the AGB says we want to do something, are they going to be taken seriously? If you have a real weak AGB, those jokers always keep saying something. But if the AGB is powerful, like somebody says, it depends on which way the wind blows, and the AGB can blow it the way of the project. And finally, leadership. If you don't have the leadership, you can't get it done. Now, getting the AGB is also a bit tricky. It's like a zoo, right? You're going to have all kinds of people saying all kinds of things. So the big boss animal has to be your chief sponsor. And then next to the big boss, right? Those are the guys, I call them moonshine, because they like to be close to the sun, so they get some moonshine on them, right? The executive owners of silos. Then their small bosses, right? You got to make sure that you have all of them. And you ensure that you get the opinion makers, the noise makers, right? The loud mouths and the sly ones, as Cotter calls them. Cotter also says the sly ones are like snakes in the yard, right? You're trying to move the project and they're digging ground behind you. So, managing the AGB is not just about getting it right, but also keeping them moving and learning from their benefits. Now here you see the picture of this organization. You can see the LOBs there. Somebody's making underwear, somebody's making jackets, somebody's making fashion garments, and all of them said that our business is different from the other. So what did we do? We set up a small architecture team. Now sometimes the problem with architects is that we think that we are kind of, a little high level. So in fact, while I was doing this, one of the vendors came and said, "You need some architects?" I said, "No, I'm not used to people from the office. But what do they know about architecture?" Sometimes I feel it's easier to teach architecture to business people than teaching business to the architects, right? Because we are so involved in systems and this and that we don't really see what is going to happen. Now, there were myths in the organization. Every organization you go, they have some big myths. In this organization, imagine you're trying to do it for 47,000 employees in that organization. And they're spread over 3 or 4 countries. And it's not necessary that all of them are educated either, right? So they were saying all these things, that we are different. Now, when they're different, are you going to create different architectures for each of them? Is it really different? So how did we break this myth? That was a very interesting part, because I think this is one of the biggest achievements from the program, right? What we did was we locked them into a room. We taught them, we didn't do a 5-day certified TOGAF program or a 3-day IT for IT program. Nobody wants certificates in those areas. What we did teach them though was what is the concept of architecture building blocks. How do they connect? How you can make components. And these things really helped, because what we did was we said, look, each of you guys go to your line of business and you take the value streams. I'll show you what we did with the value streams. You take them, and for the one value stream, you create your scenarios. You draw the BPM diagrams, and then you review it across. So LOB A has one value stream, and then LOB B looks at it, C looks at it, D looks at it. By them, all of them looked at it. Guess what happened? They came up with 74 common scenarios. People who said it could never be done, they did it themselves. They convinced themselves that after all, there's only one value stream, the same underlying capabilities, regardless of LOB differences. These scenarios, now once we had them, we were able to take them to the experts. I didn't do it. They went and did it themselves. So now again, all the experts in the LOB had to say, okay, right? So this is a very good method for us to bring everybody together on what we call as the same page. Scoping the organization. The fact is, people will find 1,000 ingenious ways, right, to come and put a spoke in the wheel, right? If they sincerely think the process is not heading in the right direction. So scoping is actually an art form, because using it, you can establish limits, you can promote the applicability of the solution, you can provide a basis for communication. It's a huge aspect. And then assure effectiveness of governance. I've had some big projects go down on me for this very reason. Why? Because when you're talking about governance, you need to worry about the scope of control of your chief sponsor. If you're going to move away from that scope, chances are you're going to be in trouble. So we used even a value chain concept for trying to get at the scope. The other guy says, organization A, organization B, this department, that department. We said, no, forget about your department, forget about your organization. Tell us what you're doing. And people always talk from, what this comes on top of the head. So they said, what I call is an apparel scope. Yeah, we cut garments, we make them, we sew them, and we ship them. I said, is that all you do? No, but we also do this, and this also, and that also. Because they really found that they were doing many of the other things apart from their core business, just to get the business, and that's how the business works. So now what we then did was to create a value chain specifically for this enterprise. Right? Now this is a very important aspect of the design and how we moved it. Because once you have the value chain, you can see that there are many aspects to it. It can act as a container. So, for example, when we take the value chain, we say what are the underlying business capabilities that are required to arrive at that value. Then you can say how they meet the objectives, goals, etc. And what are the business processes that are going to deliver these capabilities. From there, you can look at the business services. And then you can arrive at the application components that support this business service. So right from the beginning, we were talking business values, business services, and for us, IT is only automating a business service. So when it's automating the business service delivers the capability, and the capability is then into the value. We actually found that taking this approach and treating it as a central container for everything that we did helped us with many aspects of the enterprise architecture. The other thing is finding out if the organization is really ready for transformation. Because if you go and have a look, you can find that from this assessment, you can get a snapshot of what problems you're going to have in the organization. What happened to previous iterations? What happened when somebody else tried to make these changes? Also, the good and bad experiences. We used the BPM, we used a template which is very much part of TOGAF, and TOGAF recommends it. It's from the Canadian government. And this helped us to consolidate all these things together. Right? We found the pitfalls to avoid, risk mitigation actions, stakeholder and their viewpoints. The need for governance stood out. Because we realized that earlier, the seniors, the executives, the owners of the company were not involved. So they could happily go from one project to another project. In my opinion, the higher you go, the lower or the smaller the level of focus. or concentration. You can't talk to them. They say elevator pitch. So you're supposed to tell 1 year's work in 5 minutes. Of course, it's important. I'm not saying no. But the point is, you really need to have this thing done well. And the word of caution here is that when you start looking at older initiatives, why they went wrong, what happened, did they deliver on the things that are needed, you can run into controversies. Because the people who ran those programs don't want to have somebody come and say it didn't work too well. Then getting the stakeholder concerns. We did this by the interview story. We used both, we talked from the top as well as from the bottom. And we listened and recorded stories, right? We didn't go there and say, show me your application. What is the structure of it? What is the thing data are you using? How are you doing it? Right? We said, look, tell us stories, what's happening in your organization. Because we need to know when we present the solution that these stories are going to be addressed. We need to collect qualitative data. Because everybody loves quantitative data. But is that data right? What's the source? There's so many stories around quantitative data, right? But when you collect qualitative data in story form, and then you try to find the quantitative data, it really helps. Now, also when you analyze these things, it's easy when you have these concerns, you have a big table, right? You interview 30 people, and each speaking for an hour. Yeah, you've got 30 hours of notes. How do you make sense out of it? Again, the value stream can be a big help there. Then how do you get to identifying in a company what are the drivers, what are the strategic motivators, what does the business really want from this? There is a very beautiful method of doing this. It comes from a book called 6 Disciplines of Breakthrough Learning. And this we use as a constant thing. We send this to the senior executives and we tell them, you fill this, then give us an appointment, send it to us, then give us the appointment. So you're not going and sitting there with that 1 hour he manages to give you talking stories. You're able to say what exactly they want, why they want, what will happen. And setting the law with principles, right? You know, every architect thinks, yeah, I need principles. Then they ask me, do you have a template for principles? I say, yeah, look at TOGAF. Then just copy that, right? Now, actually, you can do a lot more with principles. Because the way we did the principles was that we said it's a law or a rule that has to be, or usually to be followed, can be desirably followed, or else it causes an inevitable consequence of something, such as the laws of nature. What goes up must come down. Now, your principle is going against the law of nature, it's not going to work. Or the way a device is constructed. Architecture is also a device to do something with. So, the idea of having the principles is that we can really use it like a gun, if needed. The vendors follow it, the organization follows it, but you've got to construct it right. So what we did was we said, look, here are all the concerns. Do your principles, but tell me how they match. So for example, you can see that much of the chaos in that organization was that data was in different pieces. The life cycle data started somewhere in some system, it never reached anywhere. So you can address that with a specific principle, right? Now you can't say that people should not have, disparate systems. Of course they're going to have. Somebody's creating a design program, software for drawing, somebody's for cutting, somebody's doing this, somebody's doing that. They're not interested in life cycle data objects. But then by saying that information should be shared, we know that when you integrate, you've got to decide how you're going to do this. And finally, when we look at tying it all together, you can have the goals. The goals are tied to primary principles. And from there, you have this thing. I love Archimate 3.0 because it gives you a lot of nice things to say, what is the drivers, the soft aspects of enterprise architecture. And you can link them right down to the solution and say that this driver is supported by this application company. So, what is the request for architecture? The way we see it, it describes both the journey and the destination. And when you get the seal of approval on it, what are you really doing? the executive management has clarity about business needs. They tie it down, they write it in a contract and give it to you. How the change will happen. And by specifying and approving the proposed outcome, they commit to expectations from the architecture journey. Right? So finally, they personally commit themselves to saying, I need to do this and I will do this. From there, we go to visioning the future. Now, one of the things that they say really is that in the preliminary stage, you already have an idea about what the future is like. Because that is where your highest level of abstraction of the design is agreed upon. So when you're tearing it down, you see, a good vision is like a bunker busting ball, right? It really helps, because when you put it up in front, you can look at the people and say, look, if you don't do this, this is going to happen, right? I always like to ask the question, what will happen if you don't do it? Forget about what is going to happen if you do it. Then we can say 100 things, right? So when we look at constructing the vision, you can have an authoritarian degree, right? The big boss says, thou shalt do. Doesn't work all the time. Or you have those micromanagers who come say, now you take step 1, turn left, then turn right. Also that doesn't work. What really can happen when you have a good vision? Right? It has to be imaginable, desirable, feasible, focused, flexible, and communicable. That's what Connor says. Now what we did was we were able to really put in one page, at the highest level of abstraction, the entire movement of the enterprise. Now, a great vision can serve a useful purpose even if it is understood by a few key people. But then, the real power of the vision is unleashed only when most of those involved in the enterprise or activity have a common understanding of its goals and direction. Now, what we did was we took all these layers of people, we put them in a meeting, one group at a time. The director spoke to them, the internal architects described everything with their own way. And in the end, all they said, okay, you approve or you question, but say it now. And what we did was we said, okay, these are the concerns, and this is the part of the vision that addresses your concerns. And when we managed to complete the vision and communicate it, the CIO was already able to release his pre-RFP. And this was a real big, quick win. Now, rendering the architecture, our core vision was to make it into an agile supply chain, because the apparel manufacturing is part of the larger agile supply chain. And we talked about continuous change, freeze, rebalance, and unfreeze. Let me show how that works. When we're talking about freeze, right, we are able to say, these are the processes in your organization. And this is how the process is run. And when we looked at application usage from the as-is thing, you can see the amount of complexity there. Everybody was using the same application in different ways, and so on. So what we talk about rebalancing. Rebalancing, we look at how we're doing it, what are your drivers, what are your objectives, how do they get organized, and how do they come into capabilities, and in how they produce the business services. And the IT services, and how they associate with the business services. So you see, by doing this, we are able to show very clearly the entire journey of what happens. Now here you see, also it's not just about the architecture. You're saying that you can save cost, you can do so many things. Now, if you see how we did it, was there is a planning style, right? This jacket is a style. Now that then goes to when the new brand comes and says, here's my new range, the same data is moved and then changed. And then the costing style, and finally the order style. So the data moves, only delta gets added, and I have visibility of my planning from the beginning to end. Here we see that the two supply chains, one is from the fabric manufacturer and the other is this guy. Right? Fabric manufacturer has big lead time, big cycle, takes almost a month. Now you want to do it in a week, how do you do it? The thing is, the yarn is the same, the weight is the same, and the information also comes in stages. So by linking these two and how the information progresses along with the life cycle, we were able to do that. Now when we talk about unphrasing, now here this looks almost like TOGAF. Anybody sees anything in this from TOGAF? We talk about boundaryless information flow, it's a similar kind of structure. So we were able to say that there's an enterprise service bus, we have definitions of what needs to be done, etc. And all the application components and how they fit in. Now from the enterprise's viewpoint, we're able to go to each one of them and say what are the various things that are available from different organizations, how are they going to help us, and so on. And the next step, of course, is for them now to acquire and get ready with a logical model. They are now doing prototypes, and the enterprise has released the RFPs, shortlisted the vendors, and there are some serious prototypes going on. So the real big achievement is we can do a lot of technical work, but if everybody still thought that they were separate businesses with separate practices and separate stuff, it's not going to work. But now they have a common belief, and they arrived at the belief because of the approach. So, they told us, you have given us the Bible. It's always nice to give something in hand, not just photocopies, and not just soft copies, right? If any of you want to have a look at some of this, I'd be quite happy to show you, quite happy to discuss with what has happened. I leave you with the last thought. He who is not every day conquering some fear has not learned the secret of life. Thank you very much for your time.
Excellent presentation. Do we have a mic? Is there a microphone?
Yeah.
No. Is there a walking microphone? Portable one? There we go. We got it in your hands. Anybody have any questions?
Want to?
Any questions, anybody? No questions? Overwhelmed? It was a fantastic presentation showing how all these standards fit together into one project. And really, I've yet to see that. This would be, should have been a workshop where you could have gone through. But anyways, it was excellent. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is my car. Thank you, sir. The government research center. So may I have the honor to invite you to give us a speech? So have a seat and can you share me your business card? Okay. And if possible, you can share your slide to me. Send it an email. Okay. Thank you. Do you have a drive video anytime with the slides? Sure. I do have a couple of questions to ask.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Wiseman. I'm Vice Chair of the Architecture Forum. I'm also CEO of Build Division, with which I'm a member of the Open Group. Most of my time is spent actually teaching at the University of Ottawa, where we started off with the EA program, our EA graduate course. We're looking at expanding that into a program for that. My background, I'll just quickly give a quick look. I've been around for about, well, too long. And I've had about 45 years of experience, very varied. I was a civil engineer and a military engineer, and then I wandered into IT. And that whole aspect of wandering into IT got involved in artificial intelligence, very much a knowledge-centric approach back in the 1980s. I was on faculty, and I also worked in the R&D, the research and development areas. My interest in the Open Group is open standards, because things weren't working, and I know I was in defense, and we started using the TOGAF and its predecessor, the Technical Architecture for Information Management, and that was the way we could bring coherence to some huge interoperability issues that we were trying to resolve. It was successful, and since 2004, I belong to the Open Group for that. So you can read the rest of that for right now. What I want to do is talk in terms of the knowledge base, the knowledge part of the digital enterprise. So there are a few things I want to discuss from before I start off with any detail. What's a digital enterprise and what is knowledge? Because these definitions are all over the place. I want to talk about a few case studies and lessons learned. That's challenges with existing digital enterprises and some concluding material. What's a digital enterprise? There are numerous definitions, okay, for that. So I just propose a definition here. It's an enterprise that coherently and holistically applies and leverages digital technology to provide competitive advantage. Now you notice I didn't put IT in there. It's technology writ large. This covers more than just information technology. And holistically and coherently is that everything fits together. They can share the data, they can share the outputs and the outcomes. Some of the new technology coming down the pipe is extremely interesting, but they need to, you have to have a different approach to it for that. And right now there's a lot of different perspectives on the digital enterprise. You've got the systems folks have one view on it, technology folks have another view on it, information, the IT folks have another view on it. And in certain places they have a separate group called information management, they have a different view on it. For example, they would take an information-centric view of the previous presentation, which was service-centric. And this is just something I propose to you. There are different ways of doing architecture. Application folks have different ways of looking at it from the data folks. Right now, the digital enterprise, one of the big challenges is that you're combining information from previously disconnected systems. So when you're a CIO, for example, you're not just dealing with your internal systems, you're also dealing with external systems. You'd start dealing with supply chain and the like. So the information systems is not just the information you have within the company, it's the information that's available to your enterprise. You're also integrating critical infrastructure. SCADA stands for System Control and Data Acquisition. That's where the systems engineers and the control systems, now that used to be very isolated, are now being hooked up, and this is what's one of the causes, or one of the, that's where big data comes from. You're going to get a flood of data, which you have to be able to make sense of it. And then you get the social media, which right now people just can't